Hi, I'm Jeff Meads from Tennessee Twin, and welcome to part 5 of my tips for better Facebook Live broadcasts. Yes, welcome back. Today is day 5 of my tips for better Facebook Live broadcasts, particularly for musicians doing Facebook Live gigs. Thanks to all the new subscribers who've joined the channel in the last 24 hours. Really appreciate it. If you are watching these and you want to see the future ones, then please do subscribe using the little button down below, and it'd be great to have you on board. So what are we going to look at today? Well, after the heavyweight topic yesterday of Wi-Fi, today's subject is going to be something a little more kind of visual. Today we're going to look at how to sort your video. So we need to sort out our pictures, and whilst most of our audience are probably looking to us for great music, they also want to see us too. In these days of being locked down, of course, no one has the opportunity to come and see you live, and we all know a live concert is just a different experience to, say, listening to music on record. So how can we best get your performance visually over to your audience? Well, of course, we're going to use some form of camera, maybe a smartphone, maybe a webcam, all sorts of options there. But I thought we'd start today by having a think about really how pictures work, and that gives us some great clues as to how we can do things to get the best picture down the wire to our audience. So, first off, video really is all about light. So light comes in from whatever sources are about. For example, today I'm filming a little bit earlier, so I just have the window open over there. You can't see it, obviously. And instead of having a nice big video light over on that side, I've got the natural light coming in with just a small fill light over this side. The natural light is always going to be better. Now, there's one exception to that, and that's when it changes dramatically during your broadcast. For example, if you go back to tip number 1, you'll see at the beginning of the video it is a kind of slightly shady looking picture, and as the video goes on it gets a lot brighter and a lot more orange, and that's because the natural daylight outside was changing through the video. That said, if the natural light is pretty stable, that's going to be your best bet. That light from outside or from our video lights then comes in, is reflected off the surfaces of, well, us and our instrument, and then bounces back and goes straight into the lens of the camera. So it's the light that bounces back that we see as video at the other end as an audience. But it all starts out from the light source. Light sources have different colours. For example, natural daylight is a very different balance of light than, for example, an old school tungsten bulb. A tungsten bulb gives a kind of very slightly orange kind of light, and if you can remember the days before the modern LED street lamps, then you'll remember those slightly orangey kind of lights. Nowadays we tend to use LEDs, which are a lot more blue. So, for example, if you bought lamps for your bathroom or kitchen, the little downlighters, you'll now see them labelled as warm white, which is more orange, and cool white, which is more blue. So what's best for us? Well, we might not have a choice. If we don't have a choice, then try and do your broadcast when you've got a little bit of daylight around, and of course at the moment as we go into summer, that's going to be more and more. If you can't do that, then try and make sure you use either a light which is slightly warm, perhaps not the cool LED lights, but something with a little bit of orange in it, or a mix of lights to give you a slightly more kind of balanced view. Now, once the camera sees that light reflecting off of you, we have to decide what we want the format of the picture to be. Now, for the most part of the history of video, the format of pictures has been landscape, i.e. wider than it is tall. And that reflects the fact that our eyes are formatted that way. You'll notice our eyes are next to each other and have a wider field of view than they have it high. So the question becomes, how do you format your Facebook Live broadcast? Well, we have to admit that there will be some people watching on smartphones, and they might naturally hold their phone in a more portrait configuration. But don't forget that phones can always be turned over to a landscape format too. People watching on a screen like the one behind me, a computer screen, or on a laptop, are all going to be watching landscape. Similarly, if they're using an app on the television to watch your broadcast, that's going to be landscape too. Now, also, if you think about musicians, often we're either playing a piano, which is going to be landscape, or we're going to play a guitar, which is landscape too. So my advice, certainly when you're doing your Facebook broadcast, is to head for landscape orientation, not portrait orientation, which so many people do. As we move on, we want to talk about the numbers that you might see in your camera or your phone in terms of what format you're going to be sending the video in. If you dig into the settings of either your camera or your phone, you'll see you've probably got some choices for what we call resolution. You might see numbers like 1080p or 4K or 720p, or maybe some lower numbers. So what is that? Well, unlike old analog televisions, all of the displays we have today, right from your phone up to your TV, is basically just a little matrix of lots and lots of dots, typically at least 2 million of them these days. Each of those dots will glow a mixture of red, green and blue to form anything from black to white and all the colours that you'll see on your television set. The more dots you have, then the smoother the detail that you have in your pictures. So surely then we just head for the biggest number and output that. Well, no. If you're making films or YouTube videos, then having a high number of pixels in your source content is a great idea. However, the larger the number of pixels that we're using in our picture, then the more data that is needed per second to send from your, say, phone through your router and up to Facebook to be distributed. So we need to strike a balance here. While it's great to have lots of detail in your image, we must know that that is going to tax your connection much, much harder. So my advice, maybe head for something like 1080 or 720, or if you know your connection is poor, maybe you're on a 4G connection or your speed into your house is maybe 20 megabits per second or less, then you might head for a standard definition setting instead of a 1080p setting, or maybe experiment with 720 and see how you get on. The more pixels you send, the better the picture, but what we want to do, of course, is make sure that we send a reasonable amount of data that's going to fit down your connection and out to Facebook and, of course, onto your audience. So, some tips. First of all, if you can get natural light into your room like I'm doing today, then that's going to give you a typically well-balanced kind of light. Also, if you have to light the room, and many of us will have to, particularly if we're broadcasting in the evening, then first of all, avoid light that's shining straight into your eyes. Many of you musicians will have been up on stage and will have experienced that light glaring right in your eyes. It's really off-putting. It makes you squint, which doesn't look terribly good on pictures and generally isn't just a good idea. The other thing it will tend to give you is a very hard light on your face, which will show up any blemishes you may or may not have. So avoid light shining straight at you as the performer. You can bounce it off a ceiling, you can bounce it off a wall, particularly if they're lightly coloured, and that will help distribute the light around the room rather than cast hard shadows. The next thing is, hopefully, obviously, we're not going to have any bright source of light behind us. Any camera you're using will likely have an auto exposure, and what it will look for is an amount of light across the whole side of the picture. If you've got a bright light over here, it's going to turn down the exposure and you are going to be plunged into darkness. So don't have strong lights behind you. Avoid things like windows right behind you and so on and so forth. Now, if we're going for landscape view, which is certainly the one I would suggest, one of the things you may have noticed on a lot of Facebook Live broadcasts is that People who were playing guitars right-handed are all of a sudden playing guitars left-handed. Now, I had to look into this. I wasn't quite entirely sure why this happens, but did figure it out. Phones work with the front-facing camera because most people will be performing with the camera looking at them and the display looking at them so they can check what's going on. Most phones have something called mirror mode as standard. So mirror mode means that if I poke my finger in from this side of the picture, my finger on the picture will come in from the same side. In reality, if it showed you things the right way, then as you brought your finger in from one side like this, actually on the display of the phone it would show coming in from the other side, and that's viewed as a bit confusing. But this gives us a bit of a problem if we leave it in mirror mode as we broadcast, and that's because, well, as I suggested, if you're a right-handed guitar player, all of a sudden you become a left-handed guitar player. Even more importantly, if you have words, numbers and text in the background somewhere, let's say, oh, I don't know, your virtual tip jar link or website link or something like that written up, which is a great idea, of course, all of a sudden that text is going to be backwards. And that's not going to help your audience read your links and send you money. So how do we do this? Well, it differs a little bit, but if you dive into the Facebook app, it allows you, as you go live, to go into the settings and do a horizontal flip. And that puts your broadcast back the right way. So have a look into that. There's plenty of other resources online to see the details of how you do that in your own particular phone. But I think that's a great thing to do to help your audience really get to connect with you better and, of course, see your links for tips. Next, don't forget to try a lower resolution. I would not suggest 4K for a Facebook Live, although if you're recording for, say, a YouTube video, you could try that, for example. And finally, don't forget to test your picture with a friend. As we said in the early episodes, do set up a test page that you can use that no one else is really joined or knows about, that you can then broadcast live from and invite a friend or family member to view that broadcast as you test things out and give you feedback on whether things look good and, of course, sound good too. Also, that will help you make sure that you're playing your instrument the right way around and people can read your links in the background. So that's it for today, my tips on getting video right for Facebook Live broadcasts. I hope you've enjoyed it. As I say, if you are enjoying this series and there are more to come, please do click on the old subscribe button down below and enjoy your music and, of course, stay safe. Oh well, that's it for today and we'll look forward to seeing you another time. Bye for now.